Welcome back, everybody. This is Night Flight, and today our good friend James Bartley is back. I had to bring you into the picture because it was selected on a speaker so that people can see you as well. And yeah, we are going to talk a little bit about biodiversity, genetic material, and how the alien subject is interwoven with all of this. Very happy to see him back. His website is cosmicswitchboardshow.com. And yeah, James, welcome.
Thank you, Judith. It was great talking to you the other night, and it's great talking to you again. Looking forward to this discussion.
Yeah. Maybe let's start at this point. I remember that we touched on it in other interviews when I asked you, do you think that DNA is one of the most valued currencies in the cosmos? And you said yes. So why is that?
Because it is malleable. It's amenable to change. It could be activated. It could be transmitted by frequency, carrier waves, insinuated through injections or whatever the case may be, sound waves, like you just said. So it's the currency of the universe. And I hate to use that term, but that diversity on this planet, clearly the different races of the human race in general, they all didn't come from the same place in the cosmos. Although there are commonalities, the Lakota Sioux, they claim to have come from originally, the Sirius system, and the Aborigines in Australia talk about coming from the Pleiades, as do other
the Dogon,
yeah. The Dogon, the whole Sirius mystery with Robert Temple. So definitely there has been a lot of technology transfer, let's call it, bringing that DNA. I wouldn't say colonizing, but at least putting down your proxy forces and the beings to worship you if you're in the God genetic engineering business. And it's created this rich pool, this huge petri dish that allows a lot of different ET races. Some, and I'm just postulating here, some probably don't really hang around and manipulate societies and everything else. They just come get their DNA and they go about their business elsewhere, but they just harvest this place like so many different ET species do. So what we've seen with a genetic manipulation is, and I've been talking about a lot about this recently, is the genetic de-evolution, de-evolvement, if you will, of the human race. Barbara Bartholic used to say to me, and she used to emphasize this to me over and over, she used to say, James, everyone on this planet is directly affected by the alien and particularly reptilian presence. She said, no one gets by. No one slips through the cracks. In some way, shape, or form, sometimes quite personally, sometimes quite dramatically, there is alien intervention in just about everyone's lives on the entire planet. And what we're seeing now with this mass rollout, on the one hand, you have the de-evolution, the de-evolvement of humanity, where they're so out of touch with their spiritual center, their spiritual core, they don't even have a functional, intuitive sense anymore, right? You look at animals in the wild. It is said that a day-old chick can tell by the shadow, even though it's blind and it can't even open its eyes, it can tell by the shadow made by a flying bird as it passes the sun. Even as a day-old chick, it can tell if it's a hawk or a predator or not, right? Insects function the same way. We were just talking before we came on about how spiders that have been dosed with caffeine, they can't even make functional nets anymore, right? Yeah. Something along those lines has happened to the human race, where the human race at large, it doesn't know it's under mass predation. It doesn't know that it's being pushed to the brink of extinction. It doesn't know it's at the top of the food chain. That's de-evolvement, that's de-evolution. And what they're doing on top of that is the aliens, for lack of a better term, generic, total sense, reptilians, mantis beings, what have you, they have, you can't even say they've insinuated, they've bred into being, hybridization, genetic crossbreed, bred into being the staffs that make up these biotech firms. So these chemist wonks and these geneticists in these big labs, they were hybrids to begin with. They're hybrids from a hybrid bloodline going back countless millennia. The consciousness working through them is not human. In fact, that consciousness is plugged into a hive consciousness, which is feeding in a steady stream of, this is what we're going to take the agenda next. This is what we're going to do to them. You know, what's interesting, and I'd like your thoughts on this too, is, you know, bounce it back and forth. So much of what we see on cinema today and on Netflix is what they call predictive programming. And there's a lot of criticism, and I understand it. Oh, you know, why do you pay a subscription fee to Netflix when they're pushing all this LGBT, cultural Marxist, destroy the planet crap, right? Who says I watch that? I watch historical things. I watch things that appeal to me. And although I'm not a big science fiction fan, oddly enough, I've been watching this this trilogy of movies called The Maze and The Maze Runners, and I forget, you know, all the titles, but basically it's very MyLab orientated. You know, the kids that this government agency keep trying to kidnap, you know, spoiler alert, there's something about them that makes them be referred to as the immunes, because the whole planet has suffered some, you know, meltdown of some kind. The survivors, most of them are zombies, right? So what we have is a scenario where even in cinema, they're showing some of these people have something in their DNA that makes them of value. And so from a wider planetary sense, that's what aliens of various types think when they look down on our planet. There's like a rich genetic pool there and we can just go and do our thing and revivify our species and prolong our species, and they can do whatever they want with that planet, who cares? And then other beings that are here for the long haul, they're here to terraform this place, get rid of the humans, create AI robot armies, and just leave enough humans around for their sadistic pleasure. That's their plan, at least part of their plan. So interesting.
Yeah, I recently started watching a series. It's called Invasion. It's not Netflix, it's Apple. And what I found very interesting there, the first 3 episodes, humanity still thinks they are under terrorist attacks, yeah, while they are being invaded. And I thought, oh, that is so interesting, you know, that it takes them so long to figure out what is really going on, because it reminded me of all the nonsense that's going on right now. And yeah, so, but then starting with the 4th episode, then it finally dawns on them that they are under attack and that there is an invasion. Yeah. So, but you touched on something that I think is also very important, and that means regressed races, yeah, that are on a devolution trajectory. Yeah, they need definitely
it's a de-evolvement where they can't take care of themselves. They couldn't last a day, most of them, in the woods. They need the government to tell control every aspect of their life, and they're fine with that, right? So we're talking about a really dim-witted, de-evolved primate with lots of reptilian DNA sewed into it. Because what they've done is they've, in this hybridization, cross-pollination, if you will, a long-term agenda of theirs, they've sewed their DNA into different people and the different bloodlines for specific purposes. You have the ruling kind of prison warder, controller, class, at all levels, all strata of society. So many of the people today have an authoritarian streak a mile wide, and they're not even a petty bureaucrat. They're not even a policeman. They're just some mask holder or something, right?
Mm.
So the DNA is tweaked, and the neurology and the behavior modification is tweaked per individual, even down to the individual. And then all of that is reinforced through the mass media, hypnosis, et cetera, et cetera. So you have the very passive, docile, just let everything happen and not really care segment of society. You have the supporters and the advocates and defenders of this oppressive, predatory system. And then you have the controlling oppressive class and all of its various organs. And then you have people, sprinkled here and there that just won't put up or don't believe in any of this nonsense, right? So clearly that genetic manipulation did not work on certain strands of hybrid humanity, certain people, certain bloodlines. And we've seen this over and over where one person in a family could be totally awake for the most part about all this, understand and be cognizant of their higher dimensional extraterrestrial lineage, right? And they're just from a family of people that don't have a clue and are just Borg pod people. So that is an example of how this whole control system has been set up. And nowadays, the technocracy, how they can continually fine tune and in leaps and bounds advance their agenda because of their control of medicine and their control of the media and everything else. Definitely what we're seeing is this de-evolved version of humanity is now being, on the one hand, pushed off the edge of a cliff, but those that survive for any length of time and have acceded and consented, let's say, if they were de-evolved before, there's things going on with them now where they either become dumber and more aggressive, or who knows what they'll change into. I still think that there's a zombie aspect to this at some point down the track.
Yeah. But what I meant is alien races that are regressed. You know what I mean? I'm pretty sure that there are races out there that have played around with technology and enhanced themselves with technology so much that they are in a state of total falling apart, breaking apart, and they definitely need DNA material to get them back on track. You know what I mean?
Well, the Greys, for example, and really the term Greys describes entirely numerous fashions of similar type looking being. They're androgynous. They don't seem to have any outward or at least visible genitalia. So although people that have encounters with them some of them do say that I couldn't tell the sex of a being, but I felt that it was a female or a feminine energy or whatever the case may be. Definitely, a lot of these gray beings are seeking to enhance or prolong their species, take on, from their perspective, the best of us in general, to whatever roadblocks or DNA stoppages, if you will, that they're trying to bust through. They think that, probably with good reason, they can use a DNA from people like us to kind of move them along, because clearly some of those ET races that do this, they're on the verge of extinction themselves. And it's quite likely that were it not for this hybridization program of stealing all this DNA and using human women to give birth to their alien offspring, and then extract the baby, extract the fetus at some point, right? And raise it out in space or wherever. Clearly, if they weren't doing this, some of those races would have died out by now. So with them, it's very similar to a junkie, right? Where they just got to keep coming back. There's no option. Quite possible there are other races throughout the cosmos that are likewise being farmed, genetically harvested for their DNA. And also we must remember, with the DNA, the coefficient of that is the soul, what we consider to be consciousness, what Edgar Casey called the soul entity that just we bring with us lifetime after lifetime. The stories that we've heard from places like Tulsa, going back to the 1970s, that they were working in Tulsa on understanding the soul, bioplasma, ether physics, the physics of the soul itself, right? Now we know that, I know personally that a number of ET races are in the soul harvesting business in humans, and the human reptilian hybrids that control this planet are very much into the soul harvesting, soul abduction, consciousness abduction business. Any real alien abductee or a MyLab worth his or her salt that can still recall and remember a lot of their experiences, they will tell you, yes, I've been astrally abducted numerous times. They've taken me right out of my body, right? So if that can be done, and increasingly over the last couple of decades, it became increasingly evident that deep black elements of the military aerospace can also abduct people astrally and abduct their consciousness, put their consciousness into a virtual environment scenario for whatever purpose. We even saw that in the Maze series of movies, right? Where they were torturing this one guy, very adrenochrome aspects in that movie about harvesting certain glandular secretions when the subject is being traumatized and horrified in virtual reality scenarios. That's not even fiction, that's real, right? So we must go back to what Charles Fort and others through time immemorial have been saying, that the human race, or what passes for it, is being farmed. Right? Charles Fort said that. He said, humans are being farmed. He said that a long time ago. And if we understand that aspect, and what also, another thing Barbara Bartholic said was, the aliens know us molecule by molecule. So when you talk to certain people, David Eckhart, who I had on my show, Sashida, a pseudonym of a gal who's been in the reptilian underground bases, and others for decades now, reporting what they've seen underground, how humans are being harvested in every way possible. Genetically, the fluids being harvested, the emotional, energetic harvesting, glandular secretions, et cetera, right? It's being done on a cosmic industrial scale. So what's been going on all along, the aliens have said, okay, now under the guise and, in the form of combating this dreaded, thing that's going on. Oh yeah, we got them now. So everyone should understand that if they're still looking at this from the standpoint of these are just power mad bankers, and yeah, they have weird religious practices, what have you,
Yeah.
but really they're just humans that are just control freaks. They still haven't figured it out, right? Because if one just looks at what royals, counts, countesses, dukes, duchesses, going back to ancient times, what the common folks said about people like them, it was commonly understood that the royals, for lack of a better term, the nobles, were evil, insane, like devil worshipping sewer scum. That was just a given throughout time, right? But all that has just been changed and morphed and, to the point where people are just confused about everything. So what we're seeing with this Hollywood presentation, what we're seeing with the behavior of all these garden variety serial killers and whatever that are on the loose, and this Baphomet culture they're trying to normalize, that's the alien culture. The alien culture is being presented and manifested to us, and we're just supposed to accept it as being the norm now, right?
Yeah, I remember Stargate SG-1, there was an episode where there was an alien race that looks very much like what we know as the Greys, and they called them Asgards. And the Asgards had a leader, and that leader's name was Thor. And he invited Major Carter to his ship because they were under attack by the replicators. And they didn't know how to defeat them because any energy weapon that they used against them, the replicators took that energy, adapted to it, and went further ahead. So they could no longer destroy them. And so when Major Carter was on his ship, he said, I need your knowledge because we can no longer think like you. You're what we call, minor weapons, or, you know, not very much developed weapons of yours, they are still working against the replicators. So now I need to tap your mind how to do that on a larger scale and how we can prevent that the entire quadrant here is being taken over by replicators. And I thought, yeah, that's interesting. Even that you can lose, that you have simple solutions. Yeah.
And there was the human replicators, the human looking replicators.
Yeah.
Later that started showing up in the Stargate SG-1 series, especially the Stargate Atlantis, and their use of nanobots, where they infected the base commander of Atlantis in Stargate Atlantis, and she was stuck in a virtual environment. Meanwhile, you know, she was to the outside world, she was like in a coma, but inside, in her mind, she just thought she was having a normal life. She didn't realize all these nanobots that the replicators put in there were swimming around inside of her, you know, fooling her into thinking she was actually having a real life. And that's such a metaphor for what's going on. The point you made about Thor, the Asgard commander, wanting to tap into Major Carter's brain, there is something to that. And I'm sure you're familiar with this, but many decades now, alien abductees have talked about how they were told by the ETs that were in contact with it. The ETs are very interested in the wide range of human emotions and feelings and how we process emotions and what have you. What people don't realize is they don't really delve into it the way that Barbara Bartholic did or Candy Turner did or Evie Lorgan does, right? That when the aliens say, oh yeah, we're really interested in human emotions, what does that really mean? But from the standpoint of people who've lived through it, oh, it means that they'll be put through extreme physical and emotional trauma, just screaming in agony kind of trauma. And the aliens harvest this, and then they, you know, fine tune their methodology, right? Like, for example, in one of the experiences I had, I was manipulated into thinking that I had somehow triggered a nuclear exchange between Russia and America. And so the whole world is just going up in atomic fireballs, and I wake up sobbing into my pillow, right? Because in this virtual reality scenario, they made me think that somehow I started it, right? So that was milking me for all it's worth. And abductees have also talked about being put in front of big like screens and made to see scenes of nuclear devastation, et cetera, et cetera. And that's likewise traumatizing them. So it ties.
So sorry for the interruption, but yeah, this was time sensitive. Okay, James, go ahead.
Yeah, the point being is that when, and we know this, those of us in our field knows this, that dissociative identity disorder can be transmitted multi-generationally, especially when multi-generationally, we humans that are caught up in this reincarnational cycle, we just endure trauma after trauma after trauma. So the trauma and the consciousness and the soul being seared from all this trauma is not only embedded into the DNA of that particular family tree and all of its various offshoots, but it's in the morphic resonance field itself. It's in the energy field itself. And some of these beings, reptilians and grays, it's a variety of beings, have the ability to tap into that. And our memory banks enforce us to relive in real time all this trauma that we thought or didn't even realize we had, or we thought we'd worked through, right? So the trauma is imbued into the DNA. And what's happening with the genetic manipulation today on a planetary scale, it's clear, and many people are talking about this, not just people like us in the broadcasting, podcasting business, but people in general are talking about how the behaviors of these people after they've consented, right, undergoes radical change, and they get shunted into their reptilian part of the brain. So they begin really operating and thinking like reptilians, right? So the trend for lo these many millennia, millions of years in fact, have been pushing us into this state of reptilian consciousness, reptilian behavior with the incessant wars and barbarism and what have you. And so clearly it's like this predatory class is really beginning to emerge, not just from the control system, but from a lot of the subject mind-controlled people, the pod people. They've turned into a force multiplier, just being abusive and aggressive and what have you. And people describe some of these people as being almost replaced, where the people that they used to know is just not there anymore, right? So that is a function of all these things eating away at their neurology and really plugging into the R complex reptilian part of their brain. So once again, to emphasize once again, we're seeing the human race being pushed genetically in a certain direction.
Yeah, I read an article, I guess it was NBC, the head language.
Oh,
Yeah,
you're breaking up. I didn't get the last 20 seconds there.
okay. I said there is an article on
I lost the audio again. I can't hear you. I'm sorry.
Yeah, and of course, the outlandish claim was that aliens created a hybrid race, and yeah, the global warming thing, we know where they stand, but yeah, I don't even think it has something to do with climate change, but to me, it is not that outlandish that aliens have a hybrid program here on Earth. What would you say?
Yes, and there's more than one race, ET race, and or affiliated subterranean races that are in the genetic engineering business. Of course, the reptilians are in the Draco, the winged reptilian Brahmin class, let's say. But a number of other ET races are in the genetic hybridization field as well. The mantis beings. There's a lot of key people out there behind the scenes or in front of the camera that they're mantis hybrids, right? If a clairvoyant, someone who has the third eye etheric vision, would look at these people, they would see not a reptilian overshadowing the human host. It would be a mantis being, a mantid, right? and other beings. It really comes down to which individuals from which family trees, how much, and it's more than just one ET race that is imbuing their DNA, their genetics into a given family tree. That's the thing also, because some people can be taken up by, two or more, multiple different species. It's confusing to some psychics because they'll look at somebody and one moment the person's a host for a mantis being, and they look back a little while later and there's a reptilian, taking the person up as a host. So, so that is going on too. But the consciousness, in many cases, is a hive consciousness. So they can all work to the same sheet of music. And to be sure, these various ET races that may be acting in unison, or at least cognizant of one another's presence and involvement in all this, they have their own stake in this, some of these beings. They may go along to get along with the reptilians, because the reptilians seem to me anyway, along with the mantis beings that have taken over this planet. But the reptilians may be somewhat tolerant. Okay, some of you gray factions, you can make off, we'll let you have your share of DNA, just you got to do some of this stuff for us too. So it's a cooperative effort, because in many ET experiences, unlike what some of these very famous researchers, abduction researchers in the past, the Bud Hopkins and the David Jacobs types, they'd have you believe that there were only grays and hybrids of grays, which is complete nonsense, right? They used to be dismissive of reptilians. Oh, the lizard people, that's, talk to Barbara Bartholic about that. We don't get involved in reptilians, right? That was their attitude. So it's different races have imbued their DNA, their consciousness, and their soul, imbued their soul essence. So the neurology of these people are different. The thoughts that go through them are markedly different from people like us. The visual imagery that goes through their minds, which may be a form of external communication commands. It's postulated that dolphins, when they squeal and squeak, they're sending 3D burst transmission images to each other, and that's quite possible. The size of their craniums, there's no telling what these dolphins and porpoises are capable of, right? So if you're looking at it from a hybridization standpoint, all these people plugged into a hive consciousness. And again, we were shown this in cinema and in television, the Borg collective, the pod people, right? So that is now coming into fruition. I wouldn't say it's rare, but it's starting to become rare these days to encounter a pretty much fully embodied person, intuitively connected to source, able to critically think, analyze, intuit, and feel energetically their surroundings, be able to detect negative energies, what have you. It just, trying to find them is like trying to find hen's teeth,
Yeah. So I thought this, going back to that series, Invasion, I also thought that, yeah, in a way we have been invaded a long time ago, but hardly anybody notices it. And so many, let's say, agendas and programs that are going forward under the guise of, we have to save the planet, we have to save humanity, we have to save this and that and the other. There are underlying very, very malevolent intents. And the fact alone that, this one article that I sent you where it says that the UN has they called biodiversity, they declared that as genetic resources. Genetic resources that can be owned, shared, and of course, altered. And there, I would say, it is very, very obvious that there's something else going on, because this is not a benevolent plan for humanity.
And they've got all the bases covered. We've seen it for a long time before the overt industrial planetary scale, human trials, human genetic, that have been going on all along in the underground bases and off-world, et cetera. But on a mass scale, last 20, 30 years, it really kicked into high gear. And then the pharmaceuticals, for decades before that. But we saw how they went into the rainforest. We saw how they went, to Brazil and other places, just started chopping down. These are the lungs of the planet, right? Just chopping down and clearing huge swaths, thousands of square miles of forest, of timber and everything else. Just think of not only just the species they wiped out, but all the potential cures and all those potential natural, things that could have prolonged and extend life as we know it. But no, that's got to go from their standpoint. So they replace all that with the pharmaceutical synthetic crap. But because of their long-term alien consciousness agenda and objective of manipulating consciousness, manipulating DNA, manipulating the soul, they can package all that in the form of a pill. Like, for example, I knew a gal, she already had the etheric third eye vision. She could, see the entities overshadowing the host humans. And she could see like entities, walking up and down her hallways that a person with normal, strictly ocular vision would not be able to see and wouldn't even be able to sense, for that matter. But I've heard from her and others that when they took certain pharmaceuticals, that opened them up even more. They were seeing more entities, and entities were getting aggressive with them. Like, it just noticed that, okay, these people are vulnerable. They're on a drug that our compatriots or brethren had, concocted, and they've ingested it. So that puts them in our frequency, in our happy hunting ground. And that's one of the intentions behind this too, is it's a frequency war. So anything from, from a molecular to atomic standpoint to drive into a lower frequency bandwidth. And they're just really driving it down too, with all the frequencies and the aerosol spraying and everything else, right? Everything is denser, thicker. There's so many heavy metals in the soil. So when they do, start these forest fires and they do use the directed energy weapons, places just light up, even though there's nothing there to burn, because there's so much aluminum in the soil and aluminum in people, right? Your average person has ingested so many heavy metals at this point that it's like they would light up a radar screen. So when they start sending out all these, carrier frequencies, and the people have already got all the stuff, these nanobots swimming around, they've already got all this graphene and heavy metals to begin with. That's another thing too, where their consciousness could just be taken over. And we've already seen examples of that, when we're seeing more and more examples of bizarre, aberrant, violent, maniacal behavior, right? These are people that have just been shunted down into the R complex of the brain. So we can expect to see more of that as time goes on.
So the I lost my thought.
I'm sorry, I was blabbing there for a while.
No. Sometimes it happens to me that that's usually when I get the impression that I'm sliding out of my body. You know that I have that since my brain surgery. Then if that impression is getting too strong, then it sometimes happens that I lose my thought. So anyway, okay. Did you see the new James Bond movie? Because there, the subject of nanobots is very prevalent. And in fact, James Bond has to fight off, and he dies in this movie, spoiler. And he has to fight off a madman who has weaponized nanobots and programmed them in a way that they only exterminate people with a certain genetic trace, but all over the world. And that was what this movie was all about.
Yeah, and we know that there have been ethnic specific bioweapons created by various countries for many years, right? So we know that that's not science fiction, that's science fact. It's been going on for a long time, but now we have, with the advance of technology, the miniaturization of everything, nanobots very much a reality in today's world.
Yeah, it's everywhere. It's in food, it's in cosmetic, it's in creams, it's in toothpaste. It's wow. If you really drill down into it, my goodness, nanobots are everywhere, and hardly anybody really knows what the long-term effect of that is.
One can imagine. I mean, just the effect that it would have on the minds of people. And again, it goes back to the minds, the souls. What is the ultimate purpose? Why are they in there? Is it not just to take over the person mentally and physically, but what if there's like a soul, energetic aspect to it as well? What if, there's a soul hijacking aspect to it, excuse me, as well? We just don't know, because there hasn't been anyone really, a legitimate source from the inside where they make these things, come out and talk about it, right? I mean, we've had very diligent researchers who've looked through a powerful microscope and said, there's things in these concoctions that we don't know what they are and they shouldn't be in here, right? So, but see, there's a school of thought out there, and to me, it's disinformation. They're trying to keep this at a very basic surface level, where they're going around saying, oh, anything to do with graphene, anything to do with hydrogels. Oh no, that's just a conspiracy theory. No, they're just dangerous. Okay, well, we agree with that, but all that other stuff, that woo-woo science fiction, sci-fi channel stuff, no, that's just a distraction. That's the distraction. That stuff is in there because this is an alien agenda. This is not just power mad humans who, for whatever reason, want to depopulate apparently other humans, because I guess they think they're special humans. But if they think they're special humans, why do they think that? Is it because they're really specially different than us, right? Well, it seems that way. If people could just look at the usual suspects, the culprits that are in front of us on the TV all the time anyway, that little gnomish figure who's supposed to be the world health guy and heal everybody, the nerdy guy with the glasses, with all the hand gestures and stuff, they don't look quite human to me, right? In fact, they look very hybridy, very reptile and lizard-like. And so when it dawns on people at a basic level, and we've talked about this before, Judith, but there may come a point in time when, due to energetic factors, frequency factors, either the reptilian human shapeshifters will have a very difficult, indeed impossible impossible effort to stop from shapeshifting into reptilian form. Like, we may reach a point where they may not be able to hold their human form anymore, right? Or it just continually, frequently, they have these morphing experiences. Or on the other hand, they may get to a point where they just don't care anymore. That there was a time in this planet's past when the gods, if you will, walked the earth. And we may be approaching a time when the gods, these ETs, may be walking the earth. They've been doing it at the secret bases underground and on the surface for a long time anyway, but overtly in a V-type scenario, because I don't think it's off the table that we will see alien ships just coming down from the sky, gigantic ones, hovering in low Earth orbit. And they've already programmed a significant amount of the surface level researchers into Project Blue Beam, Blue Beam, Blue Beam. There are no aliens, it's just the military. See, that's just stupidity, quite frankly. Because that's dismissive of all the anecdotal, documented information from countless people all over the world that have had experiences with ETs and non-human beings going back through the ages. That's just saying, oh, none of that matters. That's not scientific. So when they say it's just blue beam, that there are no real aliens, that's just just a theory based on an opinion. And a lot of these people, for fearful reasons, quite frankly, and reasons of ignorance and stupidity, they're not buying it. And it's okay if they don't buy it, but then they got to turn around and put the spin out of that it's all just blue beam, right? When in the underground bases, they've been harvesting on an industrial planet scale already, human beings of all ages. That's already been happening for millions of years. So there may come a point in time when these ships will just be coming down out of the sky and just hovering in low orbit, and everyone below will be freaking out. At that point, it won't matter if it's a hologram or not, because they'll be here in force, right? So people can believe whatever they want to believe, but to me, an all-out overt alien takeover is not off the table. I think there's a possibility of that at some point in the future.
Yeah. So would you say that, was it Werner von Braun who said the last card is a fake alien invasion? Do you think that plays into it? When he described the, the terrorists, the rogue states,
asteroids, the the terrorism, I can see how, because we already know that non-human beings are behind all this anyway. So if there's going to be a fake alien invasion, I've said this many times, if there's a fake alien invasion in the works or coming in the future, it's because the reptilians and the aliens want there to be a fake alien invasion. It's not going to be these power mad humans, bankers that are behind that. It'll be the aliens themselves. It'll be some variation of the V scenario, where in the V scenario, they came and they offered all these goodies, right? And we saw that in the original Twilight Zone series too. The classic episode, To Serve Man, right?
Yeah.
The alien showed up, but really The Serve Man was alien cookbook, right? So there may be this big theatrical dog and pony act where beings can say, oh, look, you humans are incapable of governing yourselves because you're just hopeless. Look what you've done to yourselves. We can help you, right? Could be that. It could be these beings come along, we can help you. And then another being, a race of beings comes along and say, yeah, but they're the evil ones. But which ones are really evil, right? Are they working in cahoots? Are they really in conflict? We have to remember that the human race we're not even major players in this. The human race is the livestock penned up in a corral, right? There's all these different ET, subterranean, interdimensional races and civilizations that have a stake in this. So we can hope and believe whatever we want. We can hope and believe that a fake alien invasion happens. It won't stop the fact that this is an alien operation. The invasion occurred a long time ago when they created all these controlling religions. They created all these institutions. They created all these hybridized bloodlines, fraternal orders, priesthoods. That was them, right? So, and in linear time, 2, 3, 5, 30,000 years, that's a blink in the eye for them. These are beings that flit in and out of linear time as we understand it. They don't have to sit around and wait. They just set things in motion. And they just have all these different ET races working for them, cosmic vassals, just moving the project along. And I would count ourselves fortunate. Think about it. We could have incarnated in any part of Earth's history. You could have incarnated in the Middle Ages or some equally crappy time, right? But instead, we wind up now with this level of awareness. Okay, this is kind of similar to some of the sci-fi shows I've seen, you know, where you have these protagonists there, it's an alien takeover, no one is aware of it, right? That's where we're at now.
Yeah. So, okay, that concludes the public hour with James Bartley. In the second hour, I would like to go into the subject of, is there something like cosmic justice? So, and yeah, we see the patrons on the other side, and until next time, bye-bye.